All right, so I'm here with Josh Cochran. Josh is one of my mentorship clients. Josh is a dentist or a former dentist. He just exited his practice this year. And we're going to talk about Josh's journey from being a dental professional, how he got started in real estate, what his first deal was, how he scaled from there, entered into the real estate development world, what he's doing with that, and what he's doing now after he rolled up and exited his dental practice. Josh, good to see you.
Hey, pleasure to be here, Greg.
Yeah, man. So let's get into it. Let's talk about your evolution. How did you, so you obviously you were a practicing dentist for, a number of years. So how many years before you actually made your first real estate investment, and what was that investment?
Yeah, great question. Graduated from dental school in 2010. Worked as an associate, started my first practice from scratch started working on it mid 2013, opened in mid 2014. And I believe my first purchase was 2018 ballpark.
Okay. So you entered your own private practice 3 years after you entered the profession. How did you fund that? How did you fund the startup of your practice?
Yeah, I didn't. The great thing about being a dentist, right, is very low failure rate, and the banks know that. And so if you're owner operator the practice, that they're willing to fund 100% traditionally.
Okay, great. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. They think, man, I can't start my own practice. I don't have the money. So you leverage to the bank. SBA loans are out there all day long for that. And was that a leasehold space, I assume, your first practice?
Yep,
Okay. So you made your first real estate investment how many years after you started your practice?
probably about 4 years.
Okay. And what was that?
That was the building that our practice was in. Um, the the owner of the building, it was us and then a gym next door, and the owner of the building was a developer, and he'd owned that building for quite some time. But I think he was having some liquidity challenges with some of the other projects he was going on, so it just kind of worked out that he needed to sell that
Okay.
building.
So did he approach you and say, hey, Josh, I'm looking to sell the building, or how did that come about?
No, I sent him an email, and it just happened, timing.
Just
Lots of
out of the
life
blue,
is
you
about
decided,
timing.
hey, I'd like to buy this. And you just sent him an email. It just happened to be the right time.
Yep, exactly. So
Yep, that's awesome, man. So how did you fund the acquisition of that? Was that another 100% deal with the banks?
no, as you know, with real estate, sometimes banks will fund owner operator buildings 100%. Not in my market. So in my market, you still got to put down your typically 25%. So I just had the cash flow from dentistry, and so I acquired the building using that cash I accumulated.
Okay.
And then in dentistry, because the dental practice is a depreciable asset, or the equipment and all that, typically you don't pay a lot of taxes your first couple of years doing a startup. So I managed to build up some cash, in part not to by not paying tax the first couple of years. So it
Okay.
helps.
So, so that purchase was just traditional bank financing, conventional loan. You didn't use SBA for your practice or for the building acquisition.
No, at the time, the SBA financing, yeah, you could only put 10% down instead of 20 or 25%. So there was an advantage there, but there was quite a bit of fees, quite a bit of paperwork. So it didn't really, you could go either way. I just chose to go with the bank relationship. But there are other programs out there in Washington State. If you're a minority or a female, for instance, I had one colleague whose interest rate, and this was outside of SBA, whose interest rate was actually cut in half. So their interest rate on their startup was 2%. So you hear about SBA, you hear about the national programs, but there's a lot of state programs that nobody knows about. And yeah, I'd highly recommend anybody who's going after loans, if you're a minority of any type, like look into the state programs. There's often benefits that you never hear about that are out there. So
Yeah. So why did you decide to buy the building? What was your trigger for you to start investing in real estate?
yeah, I guess I'm old. I don't remember. I've always had a passion for real estate. I took at least one real estate class in undergrad. That I've always had a passion for it. Um, what was the trigger? Yeah, I can't remember, Greg.
Yeah, you're just cruising along, you're paying your rent, and one day you decided, you know what, I should probably own this.
I'm sure I was listening to podcasts or reading books, and you know, it's nice to have control over things if you have the time and the expertise. And so, if you're going to start investing, it's usually best to start right where you're at. So,
Yeah,
I'm sure I was listening to a podcast or read a book, and I was like, "All right, here we go, game on. Let's send an email, see what happens." So,
just get started. That's the key. A lot of people,
yeah.
should I do this? Should I do that? What should I do? Just do something. It's, particularly and especially with something you already know and are familiar with, that's a great place to start.
And Greg, just knowing you and doing a lot of personality tests over my lifetime, I imagine you test highly as a quick start.
Yeah,
You just go.
I just do it. Figure it out later.
That's awesome.
So, what was your next real estate acquisition after that?
That's a good question. I guess I live in the present, so the history, I have to look at my spreadsheets. But the one that comes to mind was I bought some land that already had the horizontal development done. So there was buildings on either side. It already had sidewalks. It already been graded. It was ready for a building. So I bought that piece of land. Was probably my next investment, and then built a building on top of it.
Okay, was that strip center where you and I started together?
I think so. I
The
think that was
opportunity
probably
zone deal?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that was your next one. So that one required some ground up, and you hadn't done that before, and you were making the leap from buying existing to, doing your first ground up project. And that's where you came to me, and we started working together to help you through that whole process.
Yeah. So I think leap is the right word. Like anytime you do something, you just got to research it. And for me, I think it's important always to have. I like to accelerate my timelines, and so I always try to find somebody with expertise in an area. And so just did a lot of research online, looking around for a development coach, and found yourself. And that's great. I mean, there's so much risk in development. There's so many piles of dog poop you could step in. I would really recommend to anybody on the development piece, especially to find a coach, at least for your first one. It'll help save you from a lot of stress and potentially a lot of downsides. So I really appreciate you being there for me on that first one.
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot of fun. And yeah, you could definitely get wiped out quick in development if you don't know what you're doing. So when did you start? So was that also the trigger for you to start acquiring, more practices and, going down the roll up road for an eventual exit?
I think our first practice started from scratch, hardest thing I ever did. I mean, just crazy stuff happens. And I wanted to give up. It was just really, really hard. I made no money my first year. It was just brutal. And but no one would buy it, and it just forced me to dig deep and just figure it out and just bet on myself. And um by year 3, we were the largest practice in town, and our town probably has 130 practices in it. And this average practice has probably been around 25, 30 years, right? And so just by committing more time and doubling down on what we were already doing, the good things we were doing, it's the flywheel effect. Things are slow to start. it's stressful. You're dealing with people, but if you're doing the right things, you know, the compound effect, you just got to be a little bit better than other people. And then that compounds, right? So I think by year 3, we were probably the largest practice in town. And that gave me just the confidence that if I apply myself and use best practices, that we can go from last place to first place in 3 years, right? So that gave me a confidence to say to myself, okay, well, you know, there's lots of other folks around here that are high integrity people, dentists who could probably join us and have a better quality of life, have a better income, just share what we'd already done and compound that in our area, offer more services to the community, different neighborhoods, etc. So I think between that belief that what we were doing was working, the community was responding, right? We had the most reviews in town, the best reviews in town. We'd grown that fast. The belief it was serving the community, the belief that we could serve the other dentists. COVID hit, and you know, we were down to emergency services, maybe 20% of what we were typically do. And for me, I always have a lot of passions and a lot of ideas. The time is always my bottleneck. And so that created a little bit more time for us to step back with my leadership team, figure out what we wanted to focus on the next year. And, you know, adding other practices, sharing what we learned, what popped up for me, and my leadership team was excited about it. So that was the point where we started going out and talking to other great dentists in the area, started adding them to our group.
Nice. So how many practices did you end up with, or what did it look like, you know, from that point to the exit?
Yeah, so very quickly we acquired 5 more practices, merged 2 of them together, and then did a startup, all in about a year and a half. Because if you just got to take a leap, right? You just got to go for it. And yeah, and you know, the next 2 years after that, like until now, we kept it at that number of practices because I don't like to do something unless I can do it well, right? So you got to take a leap, but then you got to implement, right? And you got to achieve. And so that's how my brain works: is take a leap, achieve, take a leap, achieve. And so when you get to 6 practices, you know, these were larger practices. We helped these practices grow. One of our first acquisitions, they doubled in revenue per month in about, I don't know, 3-4 months. So we can grow these practices, but you know, with 160, we went from maybe 30 team members to 160 team members. And now that's a different skill set, right? That's a different business model. With 30, it's high touch, right? You know everybody's names, you know all their spouses, you know all their kids. And so shifting to 160, you know, I couldn't be everywhere, right? And we've done a lot of training on leadership and empowerment. So I had a great leadership team. But even so, when you get to 160, it's a different business model that helps that business grow. So we spent the last couple of years kind of refining that model.
Yeah, and I remember you and I worked a lot on that leader, delegator, motivator. You know, how to become the leader you need to be to get to that level, how to delegate effectively, how to motivate that team. And also, you know, in addition to what we did, you, with the whole dental practice progression, you know, you sought out coaches and mentors and programs there to help you with the technical aspects of your dental practice, as well as, you know, other leadership aspects of growing the practice. So, you know, again, collapsing time by investing in yourself with the resources that were already out there that have done it, you know, had been where you wanted to go and done what you're looking to do.
Yeah, I'm always talking to folks. So yeah, so mentoring, you know, for me, it's hard to find good mentors that are just committed to mentoring, right? Mainly it's just more efficient to do masterminds. So there's a lot more masterminds out there. So you know, like from my kind of my core group of guys, I created my own mastermind of folks that we can just share openly with each other. That was probably the number one catalyst for me, was that peer group of also folks that were hungry, humble, um, going the same way I was, and then just finding good strategic partners. The head of the accounting firm that we worked with our group, just really good guy, really smart. Um, our marketing company, our IT company, just really tried to change the relationship as from practice and vendor to strategic partners, working closely with them. I think that was the other piece that really helped us,
That's right. Yeah,
that
that peer
change
group.
in
I forgot
mindset.
about that. Yeah, that was huge.
So
Well, let's go back to the real estate. So you bought your first building that you were initially leasing in. Then you bought this other property where you did your first ground up. That was a strip center. And you ended up, so what did that end up looking like? 4 or 5 spaces, and you put, multiple disciplines in there?
yeah, it's begin with the end in mind. So what does the community need? It had a few shortages. One was medical, another one was like daycare. Just kind of looking what that area needed. And because we already had a dental practice with general dentistry, it also needed pediatric dentistry. It also needed orthodontics, because this location was not only serving that area, which was growing very fast at the time, it was also a funnel for the rural population. There's a Walmart in that area, and people drive 2-3 hours to go to that Walmart. So they also need health services, et cetera. So well, I say we, I guess me, when I was looking at the demographics, I just said, okay, this is a place that can really serve people. They need medical care, so let's focus our building on medical care. So it's synergistic for patients because they can just go to one place. It's synergistic for tenants because they can just get the walk by referrals, right? So that seemed like the best vision for that building. And then also like retail, I just feel like where a society is going is out of office buildings, right? And this, I mean, that's obvious now, but like 4 years ago, even I was just like, nobody wants to go in the middle of an office building to go to their medical professional. They want to see it, they want to bop in, they want to bop out. So we chose retail or medtail as our tangible expression of what we were doing, physical representation of what we were doing. So
Yeah. Awesome. So you got that built, leased up. And so what were your next acquisitions after that? I remember we were targeting some banks and things like that that were closing because, to piggyback on the office transition since the pandemic, obviously work from home is a huge thing. There's major office vacancy all around the country, but we're also seeing the same transition with banks, with online banking and all that. Physical banks are becoming less of a needed thing. And you're seeing a lot of banks close a lot of locations. So those make great medical and dental offices as well.
yeah, anybody, this is what you do, right? This is one of your strengths, is anybody who can pick up on trends that are happening in society and then create solutions to those trends is going to do well. So one trend we're seeing is bank branches closing all over the country and coming up for sale. And at first, when they come up for sale, they come up for sale at like $300 a square foot. I'll just toss the number out. And then over time, they just sit there. And depending on who the owner is, their appetite for holding that asset is different. If it's the bank itself that owns the building, typically their appetite for holding it when it's empty is not very strong. So they'll pretty much take anything just to be done. So I try to look for those bank assets where they were bank owned. There's been a few non-bank owned assets. Actually, I got an email yesterday from a broker, a local bank next to the mall. Bank's probably 6,000-7,000 square feet, but half of that's basement. So a little tip: never count the basement for anything that's worth anything. So we're just looking at the main floor. Let's say it's 3,000 square feet. I mean, they were still asking Yeah, I don't even know, $350 a square foot. It's been empty for 2, 3 years. I emailed back the broker. I was like, look, when the seller's interested in selling at $75 a square foot, like, let me know. But otherwise, because you see these banks pop up all over. I got another one about 2 months ago across the state that someone brought to me. Yeah, and it's expensive to redo a bank. That vault, I mean, all the concrete, all the rebar, that's an expensive remodel. So they're typically in high traffic, high visible areas, which are pluses. But you got to have a use that really benefits from that, and dental does. But tenant improvement costs, as you know, Greg, are so expensive right now. Build outs, right? So it's astronomical to put money into a medical build out, especially dentistry. And so you got to buy that building at a very low basis to make it work for you.
Yeah, basically land value, because the building just at that point, is obsolete and has little value for that conversion.
Yeah, the one on the other side of the state, that's pretty much what it came down to. Exactly, was land value. Can we level it and either making a parking lot or or an office building, or put a second story on it, make it an office building, which is expensive too, right? So basically, there's no value in the building. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So you've moved on, from those things. So what are you working on now? I know you're getting more into development. You've got, some multifamily. You've kind of evolved into the multifamily. So what are you working on now, and what does your portfolio look like now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, I try to split my brain into two thoughts and then merge those thoughts together. So I always try to think of future, where are we headed? I do think there's going to be less retail over time, but people need to eat. There are certain things that just people need to go to. That there is going to be retail. And AI, I think, is going to replace a lot of administrative functions. So I think office is I worry about office. It isn't like neighborhood office. Um, and then, like, you just think of Maslow's basic needs, like people need some place to live. And so if you can own apartments, that's a good thing. And apartments, wow, I'm kind of bouncing all over the place. Let's just talk apartments. So I'm heavily in apartments right now. So we continue to have babies in America, not as fast as we used to, but we continue to allow other folks to come into the country, right? In Canada, even more. I mean, there's so many people coming into Canada right now, they're breaking records. So if more people, if your population is growing, they need someplace to live. And we have this huge national debt, right? And politicians want to get reelected. And so they got to do something about this national debt. Well, inflation is like the best way to reduce that debt. So I don't think inflation is going away. I think it's going to continue to be here. Maybe not as high as it was last year, but not as low as it was before. And in apartments, you have we'll just call it revenue to keep it simple, your net operating income, and then you have your costs. And your revenues usually, let's just toss out a number, 2/3. Yeah, I'm sorry, your income is about 2/3 and your costs are about 1/3. So if you apply inflation to both of those, your income is going to grow faster than your costs. So inflation benefits housing. So if people need housing, right, basic need, if you don't have anything else, you need a place to live, and inflation benefits folks who own apartments. In my mind, if you're looking for macroeconomic trends to ride over the next 20, 30 years, as long as America's population continues to grow and costs continue to increase faster than our incomes, then multifamily housing is going to continue to be in demand. So that's where I've focused.
And with a limit, I mean, limited inventory for single family. If anybody wants to buy a house right now, or even rent a house right now, in a lot of areas, it's very difficult. So, that's creating more opportunities for multifamily. So are you focusing more on acquisitions or development, or both?
Yeah. So always have my brain in the future, but then today too, right? Like I look at today, um, and both. So I always keep an eye out for what deals are popping up, what opportunities are around me in any asset class. And then I'm also building. There's lots of incentives right now for building, tax incentives, other incentives. So doing both.
Yeah, cool. Well, I want to keep this short. I appreciate you taking some time out. I know you're super busy. So let's wrap it up in terms of, I know you have opportunities for people to invest along with you in some of these projects. So why don't you talk real quick about that and where they can find you?
Yeah, you can email at Josh at Cochran, Cochran, CAP dot com, or you can find me at our website at cochrancap.com. So the services we offer are private investments, so investing alongside of us, also real estate development services, and then CEO coaching on the dental side.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So you're helping other dentists do exactly what you did with their practices, and then probably ultimately getting into real estate as well.
Yes, with hopefully accelerated timelines and avoiding 90% of the mistakes I made.
That's how it works. That's why I do what I do. I made them all for you.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, Josh, I appreciate you taking time out. I know you're super busy, and I'll put those your website and everything in the notes for people to reach out and get involved with what you're doing.
Hey, Greg, grateful for you. Appreciate your time as always and wish you the best. Take care.
We'll talk to you soon.